Hello and welcome to WooStream, bringing Willamette to you. I'm Tiffany Newton, the Director of Graduate Alumni Engagement here at Willamette. Today's conversation features Deans Karen Sandrick and David Friedman from Willamette's College of Law. Karen Sandrick was recently appointed as the Associate Dean for Faculty. She is also an Associate Professor of Law and the Director of the Certificate Program in Law and Business. Before starting her new role as Associate Dean for Faculty, she was the co-director for the Business Lawyering Institute. Dean Sandrick's research focuses on the intersection of commercial law and intellectual property law, and she teaches contracts, secure transactions, sales deals, IP law, and IP transfer and commercialization. David Friedman was recently appointed as the Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives. He is also a professor of law and teaches commercial law, business law, and his favorite, 1L torts. David Friedman has published extensively in the field of consumer law, particularly marketing and advertising law. In their new roles, Dean Sandrick will be working to further develop the college's already robust scholarly culture alongside growing its intellectual life, while Dean Friedman will be working to help the college's culture drive toward proactive, forward-thinking, data-driven initiatives, including leveraging strategic partnerships across the Willamette campus, the region, and the nation. Dean Sandrick and Friedman, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
A pleasure.
Great to be here with all these attendees too.
To kick off, we'll start talking a little bit about faculty initiatives. And Dean Sandrick, if you could, I know that Willamette Law benefits from having a very robust group of scholars in addition to our adjunct faculty and jurists and residents. Could you share a bit about what makes the faculty so strong at Willamette?
Certainly. I love our faculty, and it's been so fun to be in this role since January to learn a new side of the faculty. I think one of the biggest things of putting my professor hat on, taking off my dean hat for a minute, that stands out to me. I mean, in a work environment, I think that you really need to respect people and you hope to be inspired by them. But I think it's the next level. It's the dream work environment, at least for me, when you respect, you inspire, and you really want to spend time with these people. And to me, that makes our faculty strong and unique. And if you were here before we started, you got to see, David and I kind of ribbon each other. And, it's such a fun thing to have in our faculty, people in every area that I can look to, both in terms of everything. I mean, I'm just thinking like all the conversations I've had just today with faculty members, specialties that help me out as in my own research, in my own role as administration, and also a relationship where if I am really struggling with something today, I was trying to figure out how to handle a process issue. And I texted a couple people. I also got a phone call from 2 people, and I checked my email, and David had emailed me. And it was really helpful to have that connection. And so I think that makes us a strong faculty, and one that we can help each other, we can grow each other, we can learn from each other, and we can genuinely also be friends outside. I can watch David's son grow up and tease him about certain things at some point in his life. And it's just such a pleasure to be here on the faculty at Willamette.
Thank you so much. So this is a new role for you, and I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about how you are approaching this work of reinforcing that culture you just spoke about, of growing the college's intellectual life.
Well, we have this great base of kind of a scholarly faculty and faculty that really care about the research. But for me, my biggest focus coming in was growing it and learning from each other a little bit more. I mean, one of the things that I feel like when I put on the dean hat in January, I started kind of delving into everyone's research a little bit more. And for example, like I knew Professor Robin Morse Cullen was environmental and justice and climate change, but I hadn't actually read her work. I hadn't stayed up to date with what she was working on, and speaking before the legislature about a recent bill, or her role with the Environmental Task Force, all these things that she's doing. And again, kind of going back to my first thing is I'm inspired by her, and I want everyone to hear about her work, and we need to hear about people beyond just the full-time faculty. We need to hear from Justice Landau. We need to hear from these people that are a part. And I think we can do a better job at that. And that's been one of my goals of trying to figure out how to grow this culture, how to do more than what we've been doing in terms of we do scholarly presentations of our research. But it needs to be a daily conversation. And it's been so fun, again, as I said, to kind of start this role and to really learn more about my faculty and be inspired and go, my goodness, we need to get this out there. We need to get this beyond just the tiny, fourth floor where I'm sitting and talk about it and share with the state, with our area, with our students, our alumni, what we're working on.
I appreciate that. And it kind of taps into, Willamette has a lot to be proud about, but we don't often talk about ourselves or share that as widely as we could and should. And I'm wondering if you could share a bit about what you will first be implementing or first, taking on in this role.
Yeah, well, I think, in terms of the scholarly culture, we're already trying new types of workshops. For example, one of the series that we have, we call the Faculty Development Conversation Series, and we really want to focus this on just conversation. And just today, I took part in what we call a research slam, and it was the first time we've ever done it here, and it was really fun. It was Aaron Simowitz talking about the private law of terror, Carrie Davidson talking about femicide laws, and I talked about enhanced damages in an empirical research project I have. And although that may not sound very interesting, terror and femicide and patent law, but it was so fun. We each had 20 minutes and had great engagement. And one thing that really stood out to me was one of our adjunct professors was there, Bruce Howell, and I'm already engaging in email conversations with him after the talk with my work and what he's doing and the combination between health law and patent law and that connection. And so having a conversation that involves more than, David and I kind of talking about our work, involves our adjuncts and involves our jurists. And we also now we're kind of promoting this in a different way on a different platform. And we're trying to figure out how to get that out there. And beyond just the research slams or the conversations, one piece that I'm planning right now, it hasn't been rolled out, but it's one of the biggest things I want to work on this summer is we talk a lot as attorneys about CLEs, continuing learning education pieces, but we don't actually do that as professors. We don't do it very well. We always are trying to get better at our scholarship, but sometimes I think we're not as great as we can be about really trying to focus on how we can connect our scholarship to the classroom and how we can learn from each other. So, for example, Justice Landau is already signed up in the fall to walk us through how he teaches a statute. All of us teach statutes in class at some point or another, but we're not specialists in teaching that. And how great that we're going to have a continuing learning education series for law professors and get to learn from our own colleagues, as well as bring outside kind of external speakers to us to teach about, to just have the conversation about pedagogy, about how to have difficult conversations in the classroom and how to manage that better and how to kind of open up conversations in a different way. So I think, those two pieces, kind of having these daily conversations about scholarship in different ways and having this kind of workshop environment where we can sit down and have this kind of safe space on our calendar every other week and learn how to do things like teach a statute. May not be that interesting, but it's really important for our students.
Well, and I think it all ties into the commitment to the craft, that you are both a robust scholar, but then also trying to make sure you have all the tools you need to effectively educate the next generation of problem-solving lawyers and leaders. And I'm wondering if you could speak a bit about how that impacts the quality of instruction at Willamette, that intense focus on making sure that you are good at your craft.
Yeah, to me, they go hand in hand. You can't teach if you don't know what's going on in your area of law. And also, you don't want to teach an area that you don't have passion in. And so for me, that is just so connected. The pieces I was talking about, the kind of the scholarly conversation, the faculty development conversation series or the CLE series, those are moments where we can learn how to better that connection between the two. That passion, though, is there. And, for me, for example, this past week in my contracts class, I was teaching parts of employment law contracts, and I had a couple that I recently worked on a side project, and I could bring those clauses in right at that moment and say, we need to workshop this. These are two that I have had on my desk this week for a different matter. I have permission to share them, and let's workshop those in how that is appearing in 2021 law compared to the cases that we're reading that were maybe a couple decades old. And to me, it's the most fun thing when I get to say this matters right now. I had another experience actually just today in my deals class. I have my students. We're in a kind of an M&A part of our deal. And so every single class, a student will talk about a merger and acquisition that they're interested in, and antitrust law keeps coming up. And I just signed up to speak to our legislators about this policy that's coming up that involves patent law and antitrust. And we could speak about it in that moment. And I'm saying, yes, Oregon is looking at this right now. And we're trying to figure out if this is anti-competitive, if pharmaceuticals are settling with generic manufacturers, and should Oregon police this in a way that is outside of the FTC. So, me being abreast of the knowledge in my field naturally is going to transcend the conversations and get my students interested in what is outside of the casebook. Sorry, that was a lot, Tiffany, but I love this conversation, and I love bringing what I do to my students, and they also help me with my craft. They ask me questions that are helpful for me to think, well, I haven't thought about that angle, or I need to research how, health law, like again, health law, what you're doing in Professor Hall's class is going to translate into our class. So, focusing on a scholarly agenda, focusing on the scholarship talk is going to help in the classroom, and it is just connected for me.
Well, and I think it really helps tap into the interests of your students as well, when you can connect it to real world events, to what's happening around them, to what they're reading about in the papers. And I'm wondering if we can switch just a little bit and talk about what might be on the horizon for faculty as you're diving into these different, skill sharing conversations, sharing research, breaking down some of the traditional silos that might exist in academia, those kinds of things.
Yeah, we definitely have some thoughts and some fun things on the horizon. The summer is really the summer of planning, so to speak, because I just started in January. But one thing that I'm excited about is this kind of podcast idea, and having a channel where we speak to our students, having a channel where we speak to other professors, having a channel where we speak to our alumni and the leaders in the community, and having some, the word that we all love to use, but also hate to use, but having some synergy between those three. I'm really excited about that project. It's on the horizon. It's something that we're actively thinking about, and that our students, Dean Galini and I were already thinking about that. And then we had students that came to us and said, look, we really want to have this for our students. We need to have a different space, and we need to hear from different voices. And can you help support us? And I said, yeah, we're thinking about the same thing. Let's collaborate. So I think that was kind of one of the aha moments for me. It was about a month ago when I'd been thinking about this and trying to figure out how to make sure we have kind of every voice represented. And it's been so again, fun. I'm using that word, but it's been so fun to see a different angle and have students come to me that are leaders of their group, and connecting that piece with what we're doing in our scholarship and our daily teaching and lessons. So that's just one example. We have kind of some other fun things that we're thinking about, but that's one that comes to mind.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. And it really taps into using new technology, but maybe in different ways, and really letting students drive some of this effort as well, where that makes sense. And I'm wondering, so we're going to switch slightly over to Dean Friedman. You are the first person to take on the role of fostering strategic initiatives and partnerships at the College of Law, although I know that this has been done informally for years. And I'm wondering if you could share a bit about what this means from your perspective and how you are tackling this work.
Sure. Thank you. I guess there's I always like to say this, there's a short answer and a long answer to that question. And the short answer is that we want to start approaching everything that we do at the law school, whether it's something that we're already doing or something that we're thinking about doing, from the mindset of investment. And by that, I don't mean the traditional way that we're thinking about investment, but to ask the question about whether we're investing our resources in the best way to serve our JDs, primarily our JDs, to create a better educational experience for the JDs when they're here, and ultimately to have a good outcome for them, where we can get our students started in their careers and on their careers on a happy pathway to having a good life in the law or something that's adjacent to the law, whatever it is that they're choosing. So we're trying to speak in this mindset of investment, and that's a cultural change for us. We're trying to drive the culture towards making data-driven decisions. And when we start to think about our forward-leaning initiatives, I'm kind of there constantly. My colleagues will hear me say this. We need to challenge our thinking. We need to ask if we're doing certain things based on our gut, or on the way things used to be or always have been, or on the way they can be or the way that they should be. And the way to answer those questions is to ask, what does the data tell us? So my colleagues are constantly now hearing me saying, well, that's a great idea. Does the data actually support going in that direction? Or is it just something that that we value? Do we have a hunch? And if so, can we prove it? Now, in legal academia, this is a novel approach. Elsewhere, it's how organizations tend to thrive, but it's a new mindset that we're bringing here. So, does the data support what we're doing, and can we go to our students, to our university colleagues, and to our alumni and say with confidence that we're doing things in a way that we're putting our best resources to best use?
Well, and I'm wondering if you could get into specifics a little bit more about what the data is telling us and what are some of the immediate efforts that you're trying to stand up at the school and approach.
Okay, so the first thing that I think we're looking at in a big way, and it's going to take some time to roll it out, but it's investing in an academic advising system that we think that it would be probably one of the highest, best value places where we can improve the experience of our JDs, the success of our JDs from the time that they even think about applying to law school deep into their careers. So in order to do this, so an example of how things might work in an institution that's not data-driven is you just say, well, advising sounds like a good idea. Maybe we're not doing it very well right now. That's the feedback that we're hearing. So no brainer. Let's just do it. Well, there are lots of different ways you can do it. So one thing that we did was we took a step back and we launched a massive analysis of our student performance over the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. We took a look with anonymized data. We looked at the credentials and of every student that has come through our door. We looked at, their academic performance over the course of their careers. We looked at the roles of our curriculum and how students performed and what the outcomes were. How did students do on the bar? How did they do in terms of employment? And we looked at data from other schools that was out there too, in addition to our own proprietary data. And we learned a bunch of things. One of the most important things that we learned is that a student's incoming academic profile is not their destiny. It's what we do from a curricular standpoint to support students that matters. We also learned that we really do overperform a lot of law schools that are like us in terms of getting good results on things like the bar exam and employment outcomes. That the data shows that. What we want to make sure that we're doing is that we understand why and that we preserve the why. And so what we've done, and we're still working on this because we're still looking at the data and we've got a lot of it, is where in the experience do we put our advisory resources? How do we organize it? And where do we intervene? And how do we help everybody in the student population? How do we serve a diverse community? How do we get more thoughtful about that? And really the best outcome that we can have is a student body that's happy, a student body that's well, a student body that's thriving, a student body that we retain students, where they pass the bar and they're happy. That's really our goal. That's why we're here. And so we're putting data to bear to bring that. And that's one large example. And I have to put in a plug for this, but one quick hit example of something smaller that's data driven is that we have a signature strength in healthcare that we've identified. And we've been talking about it for a long time. This year, we actually took a look at, well, what's the market and demand for healthcare? We looked at, is there a market for healthcare lawyers? And it turns out there's a massive market for lawyers who enter that field, and that there aren't that many programs in the country where there's a specialty in healthcare law. So what we were able to do was make a case by looking not only at what the market is doing, but what our students have told us that they're interested in, that we should put together a certificate program in healthcare law. And while it hasn't been officially rolled out, it's something that over the course of the past 6 weeks or so, I have pushed our faculty to look at. And at every turn, I said, this sounds like a good idea, but does the data prove out that it's something that will help our students, that will enable a certain set of students to achieve better results and have a pathway to a great career? And so we came to the conclusion that we could do that, and we will be doing that. So you'll be hearing more about that shortly. So
that's very exciting. And it sounds like it's the perfect way to kind of ensure that the outcomes you're striving for are what's actually happening, and you can back that up and then focus where either there needs to be better, more improvements, or where
Exactly.
you're doing things wonderfully.
And I'll just, key to this is being self-critical. It's going back and actually looking to see whether it's working. It's talking to students about whether it's working. It's talking to alumni about whether it's working. It's looking at the data and adjusting, not setting the ball in motion and then walking away. It's about coming back and seeing if you can make it work better.
Well, and I think that also helps everyone feel like they're a part of helping to build upon and improve what we offer here on campus. And so I'm wondering if you could also kind of, you talked about some immediate things, but if you could expand that a little bit and just share maybe what you might be reading in the tea leaves, what might be coming in the next few years, and how that will impact Willamette legal education.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that when I take out my crystal ball, it's actually not all that hard to read. There are a few things that are coming down the pike that I think are very exciting and that we're well positioned to be a part of and to be a regional and national leader in. The first is that I think we are finally at a point in the legal profession where there's an alignment between state bars, employers, and about the notion that experiential education matters. And we're already seeing, regardless of what the future of the bar exam may be, and it could range, something that I've been following and looking at very closely. We do know that the bar exam in about 3 or 4 years is going to focus a little bit less on content and a little bit more on skills. And so we think that that's a great thing because it enables us to take a look at what we're doing and making sure that we're aligning opportunities for our students in a way that they can both have the outcome of passing the bar, but also have the outcome that the firms and the employers and the bars tell us that they're looking for, which are students who are really, truly have opportunities to be practice ready and at Willamette in areas where they'll be excited to practice, which gets to the signature strengths issue that we'll talk about later. So I think really, as soon as next year, potentially, you'll start to see some real shifts in our focus and our offerings of experiential opportunities as we build that way. The other thing that I want to talk about is that this is another place where we wanted to go, and the profession is starting to pull us there, is that the ABA, I think, is kind of reading our minds a little bit, in that they want us to focus on things. They're going to have a requirement that law schools focus on development of professional identity. And they're not really defining what that is, which gives us a ton of room to define what that is. And we think that it's an opportunity to view it as a way to adjust our curriculum to train lawyers to thrive in the middle of the 21st century, because that's really where our incoming students are going to be spending their careers. And that means, how do we train leaders? How do we how do we train leaders to appreciate diversity as an asset, and that it's part of your identity is being part of a community that you want to celebrate, and a community that's diverse that you're able to serve. These things we think are really important, and the specifics of how they're going to get rolled out, I mean, we're working on that right now. But I think that if you're asking me to look in the intermediate term, that's probably where we're headed on both fronts: experiential learning and professional identity, and those things are going to intersect.
I think that's amazing, especially when you consider that your education is the most expensive thing in time and money and focus that you will ever, do in your life with that you can't immediately sell back like a house or a car. So it shows that we're taking that investment seriously and considering how to best prepare folks for this. And I'm wondering if you could speak a bit about what excites you about this work. You went through a couple of different examples, but I know it's kind of a unique role, and you could speak a little bit about, why you're excited to be the person to help bring data to the forefront here.
From a selfish personal standpoint, my background before I went into legal academia was in the business world. And I was a strategy consultant, and I worked with Fortune 100 companies and private equity firms about making, how to make tough business decisions. Do we buy this company? Do we grow this particular division? Do we launch this initiative? Do we discontinue this other initiative? And those were hard problems to solve, not just in terms of the analytics, but culturally, those could be difficult problems to solve. I also work with nonprofits as well, which were even harder because they're facing the same kinds of problems and challenges that educational institutions are. Where do you invest your resources to have the greatest social impact? So I'm excited to be able to kind of take that toolkit back out and bring it to bear at an institution that I really care about. I really care about the students. One thing that we always say is that we're the oldest law school in the Pacific Northwest. I like it better when we say we're the first law school in the Pacific Northwest, because I think that positions us to think about that we have a deep heritage, but we're thinking about the future. We want to continue to be first. So what excites me about this is that I kind of get to sit on the bow and kind of point at the opportunities and say, this is the direction where I think we should go. Let's see if it bears out that we should go there. I think it's for me it's gratifying personally, but to be able to take the institution there, it makes it even better.
That's wonderful to hear. We need a lot of help kind of navigating market factors and where students are headed, changes to the profession. And you've kind of touched on this a little bit in speaking about the ABA and the development of professional identity. But I was wondering if you could share a bit about how our mission to prepare students for, their first day of practice to successfully launch once they leave the college ties into this alignment with kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and how that will really kind of lead the way in legal education moving forward.
Well, I think that if we're in the mindset, again, it's about culture, right? If we speak to our students in a way that we're talking about that their law school education is an investment, it changes the whole mindset of why you're here. What is it that you're trying to get out of a class? What are you trying to learn? Are you trying to learn the patterns of thinking like a lawyer, or are you also trying to learn kind of some of the basic skills that comes with being a lawyer? And are you really learning? Are you investing in what I think is the most important thing? Many of us think is the most important thing, which is being a lawyer who knows how to learn for a lifetime. Because I can tell you that when I went to law school back in the 20th century, there were a whole lot of things that are out here now that you needed to have a framework and a foundation to understand that didn't exist. Thinking about things like technology and privacy, right? So we want to create an entrepreneurial spirit here. We want to get people to think about making an investment that's going to have a return over the course of their lifetime. And a lot of lawyers today, a lot of our students, to put it in brass tacks, they want to actually go into practice for themselves pretty quickly, if not right away, maybe sooner rather than later. And we want to be able to lay out for them what that means too.
Thank you for that. And so we've just kind of covered some of the stuff about how we're investing in faculty and building out that culture and those relationships. We went into a little bit about data-driven analysis of the programs that we currently offer and how that can inform where we're headed next. And I'm wondering if we can pivot a bit to talk about our new Signature Strengths initiative. It's really a way to kind of focus the whole learning community around what our academic offerings are, our scholarly rigor at the college, and really see where we can add breadth and depth to what we currently have on the docket and what can come up next to really meet all of those different factors from, student passion and interest to market factors to everything else. So I'm wondering if you could talk to, and I'm going to use Karen's favorite word, what are some of the synergies that come out of this enhanced focus on faculty investment and strategic thinking while doubling down on providing what we would call an only at Willamette legal education in the areas of public service, business law, advocacy, international law, and health law.
Karen, I don't know if you wanted to, I can.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to speak as well. What's interesting, Tiffany, about this is prior to delving into these separate areas, public service, business law, advocacy, international law, health law, if you had asked me, and just using myself as an example, if you had asked me which category I fit in, I'd probably go, well, I'm a patent person. So if I had to pick one, business law, and that makes sense because I also did the Business Law Institute and deals in all of this. But what's interesting too is that patent is a public law thing, but it's private law, and we have patent law to innovate and to motivate and to have people learn. And so there's a little bit of public service, there's a little bit of advocacy here. Kind of the rate of innovation is really important right now. Look at COVID vaccines. And then if I actually am honest, my own scholarship, I have several papers talking about the global regulation of pharmaceuticals or of the global kind of collaborative efforts that we need to have. And so all of a sudden I'm looking at this and I'm going, wait a minute, am I business law? Am I international law? And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to fit perfectly in one because the law doesn't fit perfectly in one, but these are broad categories where our faculty have expertise in, and we have multiple faculty members that have expertise in kind of all of these or several of these. And for me, seeing these and trying to think about, okay, well, who, if I have on the faculty, who would I slot under to talk to students about business law or international law? It's really opened up my mind and kind of doors of opportunities, synergy, to have these collaborative efforts. And for example, Professor Caroline Davidson, all of a sudden we're going, wait, should we do a joint project? In the international space, you criminalize certain types of intellectual property infringements. And we don't do that here in the US. And should we? And then we're thinking, but wait, how do you hold corporations accountable when it's not really a person that's there? It's just a bunch of, execs that are making decisions. So then we need to pull in Aaron Simowitz. And all of this kind of conversation that has built up has come from identifying these signature strengths, thinking about these areas and kind of taking the moments to really speak with each other and figure out our collaborative areas. And for me, that's exciting because it also gives me feedback on kind of what we do moving forward with our faculty conversations, our CLE, our podcast. So I have just learned from this about our own faculty, our business law faculty. It's not just Professor Simowitz or look at David is a good example of this. I could put him in multiple categories here. And I think this has been really good to both give us these categories and also break down these categories and show how fluid. And that's the law. You got to be in an area of law and you got to recognize how it attaches or does not to the next area of law. So that's probably not really responsive to your question, but I think it has, it's enhancing our focus on each other and our collaborative areas and how we can grow that networked effect between us.
And for somebody in my shoes, the fact that we identified these areas enables me to not only ask the question, what does the data show? But it also enables me to say, okay, so how can this opportunity, how does it actually fit into what our signature strengths are? It provides me with a nice framework to get faculty to articulate why an idea and how an idea can fit into our signature strengths, which also, by the way, sometimes map onto university priorities and strengths. So we're able to leverage those partnerships as well. Thinking about things like healthcare law in particular, for example, or what's happening with data science and how that links into not only healthcare law, but also into business law as well. So it provides a nice framework that everybody knows what it is that we're about, what we're supposed to be doing in a unique way, that we're not just going to throw, we're not throwing darts here. We're doing things in a deliberate way where people can understand why we're doing what we're doing and where we're going.
Well, and I think it really highlights a focus on being intentional and really taking the time and making the effort to understand what we do well, what we could do well, and what makes sense in the current time frame, but also looking forward. And as someone who works with a lot of different campus partners, it also helps having some shared narrative and some language and a framework for how we talk about ourselves to folks who maybe aren't on campus all day and don't participate in a lot of these conversations. So I know from my perspective, I've really appreciated that. And we'll see it come out in admissions and in alumni events and in all the different ways that we connect people back to Willamette. And I'm wondering, and we've touched on it in a couple of different ways, but if we could talk about really the strategy behind this initiative and how these efforts ensure that the college is well positioned to respond effectively to external factors like the market drivers we've talked about, like changes to the legal profession over time, and, responding to a global pandemic that no one was anticipating or prepared for. And we could mention also wildfires and ice storms and everything else that has come out of this wonderful, wonderful past academic year.
One thing prior to joining kind of this dean role and this dean team is I've been really focused on the business lawyering institution. And for me, that's a really good example of looking forward and thinking when LegalZoom and the Box, whatever, can spit out a better quitclaim deed, NDA, asset purchase agreement in 1 minute for $50 than I could ever draft in that amount of time. What is our value as lawyers? How is technology changing our practice? And how do we recognize this value and teach our students to recognize this value and provide this value and advocate for themselves for this value? And so the Business Lawyering Institute, I think, okay, we have to be problem solvers. We have to understand the context of how we fit in as lawyers in the business world. And that's just kind of an example of where we can think, okay, signature strengths in these areas, opportunities for students, both in the classroom experiential, outside the classroom, also experiential, but outside in terms of the way we talk about experiential, and making sure that they have the skill set to move forward in the times and flex with the changing times with technology. And there's a whole bunch of those we can talk about, e-discovery and all these things that are changing our practice. But it really goes back to what David was saying, is that we got to learn how to teach ourselves and be lifelong learners. And that includes adapting with this. How do you be a business lawyer in the pandemic? How do you be a trial lawyer in the pandemic without a cat face on you the entire time of your Zoom phone call, right? And he made it work. It was fine. But in all seriousness, I really love some of these initiatives that we've been focusing on, because it really gets to the skill set, not just learning law and just passing the bar. It's so much more than that. This education has to be so much more than that.
One thing I'll say is that if you go back and you really look at, as I have the last 40 years, and looked at what people have said about the legal profession changing and technology, it's repeatedly been a theme that technology is going to change the profession. And I worked for a law firm in Boston that had a plaque, and this tells you also how old it is, outside of their computer room, like where their servers were back when you needed a room for that. But the plaque on that room was dedicated to a partner who said in 1983, I see no reason why a lawyer would ever have need for a computer at their desk. And they put that quote on there and they dedicated the room, they named it after him. But that room is probably gone. So we've seen all these different revolutions. People thought that Westlaw and Lexis were going to change the profession irretrievably, or that e-discovery was going to change. And you know what? These things do. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, people need lawyers to solve problems. The problems are going to change because the world changes. You know, it's not the 19th century world that I teach about in torts, where everything is about a machine exploding or a railroad accident. We're dealing with modern problems, but we're still solving problems for people. We're just solving the problems that they have now. And we have to meet them where they are, and we have to understand that. So, for example, our data science initiative, I've had people saying, well, what does data science have to do with law? And I said, well, just wait and see. A lot of our clients, the clients of the future, are going to be involved in data science. There's going to be a lot of data science brought into the practice of law. If data science is the most popular undergraduate major, which it is now, and one of the fastest growing job categories, that's where the economy is going. And just like there are a lot of jobs in railroads in the 1850s and a lot of activity, there's going to be a lot of activities involving data, and lawyers are going to be right there with it, making deals, solving problems, resolving disputes, or creating disputes and resolving disputes. We're going to be there. So we have to be nimble. And these signature strengths all kind of come back to things that are going to be durable. Public service is always going to be valuable. Transactional issues, business law is always going to be needed. Advocacy. International law, at some point we might say that what's the distinction between American law and international law? It's just another outcrop of law. And health law, I think, is kind of special in that it's something where it's important right now, and it's just going to get more and more important. So.
Well, and I think all of this is really facing reality, understanding that we're entering an information economy, that globalization has been happening, forever, and it will just continue to be more so. And as we take on new technology, there will be different issues that are raised by all of these, wonderful phones in our pockets and being able to stay connected all the time. And yet, there are legal issues that come out of that. Just 24/7 accessibility. I'm wondering, we have one question from an audience member that's really kind of situated in the government form of things around, is Willamette Law considering constitutional law? I know we have a couple of different professors focused on that, especially around some of the things folks may not have really appreciated over the past 4 years or so, around how pardons are used, money in politics, gerrymandering, all those different things that kind of chip away at the franchise or the ability of individuals to be a part of the representative democracy that we are in. I know that might not be in either of your areas, but I was wondering if that you might know of kind of efforts of your colleagues in this space.
Where's Professor Norman Williams when you need him? That's a kind of a great example, and he's teaching election law, for example, in the fall, and I think that's really important. And he's got a Center of Constitutional Government. And I know we're looking forward. He's been on sabbatical this year, and we're looking forward to having him back on campus and having his leadership in some of these areas that seemed to implode or explode, or I don't know what the right phrasing is. Not directly speaking to this, Tiffany, but I had a conversation with a student after class today, and we just talked about nuance and how important nuance is, and what can we do as students to ensure that even our respective student groups are recognizing this nuance and how to speak to each other, and that it's not just this and that. And even I feel like we have to start at the ground level with our students, but I do recognize, good to see you, Michael, or see you, but good to see your question, as a former student. There's a lot to be done here, and there's a lot of advocacy work, but there's also a lot of just educational work and listening to each other and trying to figure out why we are where we are and why we were where we were and all those places in between. So I don't have programming myself that I have on this, but I know that we have people that are in this area and that are thinking about some of these issues.
And we have strengths in this and we've done symposiums and things like this in the past. We had a big election law symposium several years ago, and it's certainly ripe for something that we might do again, or there's a lot of interest in it. But Karen keyed in on something which I think is important. I always tell my students that they are about to become super citizens. So we're talking about advocacy. As a lawyer, you have a responsibility and a role to help the public understand how the system works and what the rules of engagement are, and to elevate the discourse. And if you just go onto Twitter, or you go and have conversations with people, a lot of people don't understand. It's not even a deficiency of civics, even though that might be a thing. People don't know how to have a dialogue with each other. And we're training you not only to serve clients, but to try to make the world a little bit better by being out there and helping people who might need your help, or just changing the nature of the conversation. So that's part of our mission.
I appreciate that. And I think it really ties into Dean Galini's ethos around culture is king, and really modeling ways to engage with each other that allows for people to kind of step up and learn and do better once they know better, and to be okay entering very uncomfortable spaces maybe, but with a focus on learning from each other, supporting each other, and coming out at the other side of things with a better understanding of maybe the lived realities of other folks as well. One of the other questions, to pivot a little bit, that we just got was, what is the best way for alumni, for folks who are no longer connected to the university, to access the research that you've talked about, all of this wonderful work of the faculty, the stuff that you're producing that they'd really like to stay abreast of?
Yeah, I'll speak to that just to start. A couple of things. Well, one, you better follow us on social media. We have, I joke, but I don't. We have a wonderful communications director, and she's putting this content out really quickly in kind of real time. And we're trying to kind of leverage that platform a little bit more to send out, like, I know I saw how I actually came across a Statesman article recently about involving Robin Morris Collin, and I mentioned her earlier in the program is because Cindy tweeted out about it, and I thought, oh, cool, environmental justice, what is she doing? And so I think if you follow Willamette, you'll see some really great content. Also in the future, again, stay tuned. Sounds like you might be a future subscriber to the podcast I'm interested in, but we're also always available. I feel like sometimes it's like our students leave, and then I'll hear from you sporadically every now and then. And if you have me, I hope you know that I love to hear from you and I love to connect with you. And in my role, certainly, if you've got an interest, I'm always happy to kind of connect you with different folks, and to ensure that events that we're having, we can have you be a part of those events. So Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, we do quite a bit for events that we're having. So plug into us, and we can kind of stay in touch with you.
If you're interested in what we're doing individually, if you go to our website and look at our individual web pages, we all have links to you click on a link to our Social Science Research Network page, and you can find things that we've written. We love to have people read our work and engage with us on it.
Please.
You love it.
More than my mother. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Please read it and react to it. That's why we write it.
I mean, if you guys have not followed David Friedman on Twitter, you are missing out. And I'm actually really quite serious. He has a provocative, thought-provoking, really, really, really good article out right now. And he did a lot of engagement with Twitter. And this is involving our alumni in some ways. We always talk about bar passage and we talk about what happens though. I mean, why is it that other professions continue doing these CLEs and they take these tests over and over, and we lawyers don't? And let's really question this. And David has a piece about that. And if you engage with him, it's going to better his research and we can connect with you. So he's just a great example on Twitter. And I know that he's had a good time engaging with a lot of the community about whether we should have a bar exam for those of us that are in the profession.
It's a trolling question. I want to be clear about that.
Careful.
Get lawyers to think about, what is the bar exam really about? Does it really measure competence? And if it does measure competence, then why shouldn't all lawyers be taking it regularly? It's just a way of trying to get people to think, getting back to like where I am in my headspace about data. What does the data really show? What does the bar exam really function? How does it measure? Do we just do it because it's something that we've always done? Why do we have it to begin with? Those are the types of questions I like to ask about my own research. Happy to engage with anybody about that offline, or you can tweet at me if you want. But those are the kinds of questions I like to bring to the law school itself, which is, we've been doing things that we've had a first-year curriculum that looks like this for about 40 or 50 years. Is that the way it needs to be? Is that the way it should be? Why is it that way? Because somebody at Harvard Law School in 1895 said so? That's a large reason why it is that way. Should it be that way? Those are things that we need to think about.
Well, and I think it ties into, once a professor, always a professor, that critical thinking, trying to get people to examine, their own beliefs and how they approach different material and come at it with with a different lens and kind of analyze it in a different way. We only have a couple minutes left. So for those who are still with us, if you have any final questions, please know that you are welcome to submit them using the Q&A feature or in the text box. Otherwise, we'll spend just a couple minutes kind of wrapping up, making sure we didn't miss anything that was on our list of stuff to share with you all this evening. But we've really enjoyed this conversation. So this is the final ask. If there are any other questions we can tackle while we have the deans here with us who've been so generous with their time.
And I was gonna say, I see some former students on the list, and I don't let me start calling on you, Alex Hutchinson. No, just kidding. But Patsy, there you go. No, but on a serious, we really do love to hear from our former students. We love to hear what you are seeing in the law. So please do stay in touch with us. We've been kidding around a little bit, but we really value you and your opinion, and you are out there, and you are the ones. If you remember, I brought folks to my class, and I'm going to be calling on you to come to my class and to give me input. So stay in touch seriously, and anything we can help you with, and vice versa. We love to stay in touch with you.
All right.
I'm saying I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm saying hi to everybody on there, particularly the alumni of my consumer law seminars who are on here.
Well, and I love how everyone's, saying hi and stuff in the chat. We really appreciate that. So we're at time. So Dean Sandrick, Dean Friedman, if you have any kind of final thoughts you want to share with us before I kind of close us out for the evening, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, it's been a wonderful conversation so far.
I would just say I love what I do, and I really appreciate the chance to do what I do. And I hope that you all can find something that you love what you do, and can bring a level of passion to it that really makes these difficult times a little bit easier. And I just hope everyone's well and stick together. We're a community here, a community of lawyers, community in the Pacific Northwest, and we care about you and we see you.
If you're here, you're part of our family. Really don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's something we can do for you, or if you have any ideas. They typically don't come from inside the walls of the law school. They come from outside. Let us know if something interesting is happening that we should know about. I'd particularly be interested in hearing about it. So please reach out.
Thank you.
David, control you next in your problem. That's not trolling. David does a master at it. I love it. Kidding.
I could use those skills. So with that, I will just say, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Deans Friedman and Sandrick, again, we appreciate your time and all of the efforts that you are focusing on in support of our students and our learning community here at the Willamette College of Law. For those who have joined us this evening, we hope you'll continue to turn into WooStream, our virtual programming platform. And until then, we hope that you are staying safe and healthy, and we wish you all the best guest and look forward to seeing you online sometime soon. Take care, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, everybody.